welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going to crack open the Steve Jobs story. You gave us this documentary about his life, and wow, there's a lot to unpack.
Definitely. Everyone knows the name Steve Jobs, right? But this deep dive is about really getting into like the why behind the what. Like, how did this one guy change technology business, even how we think about being creative?
Yeah, he seemed to break all the rules, and somehow it worked out for him. To really get Apple, you got to get him right. Let's start at the beginning.
Makes sense because those early years kind of set the scene, Growing up in Silicon Valley, being adopted, all that fed into this feeling that he wasn't like everyone else. He didn't have to follow the rules.
So how much did growing up surrounded by like tech innovation actually shape him? Was it destiny or just a coincidence?
It's a little of both, honestly. Young Jobs wasn't just near technology. He was encouraged to tinker. Remember that story about him calling William Hewlett, asking for spare parts, like as a teenager?
Wait, hold on. That actually happened? He just called up the head of HP?
He did. And get this, Hewlett was so impressed he gave Jobs the parts and a summer job. Talk about guts paying off. This tells you something about Jobs early on. He was bold, he made things happen, and wasn't afraid to go straight to the top.
Those are some serious entrepreneurial skills right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got this tech-savvy kid, but the documentary also says he wasn't exactly a model student.
Not the teacher's pet. No, Jobs was bright, but he got bored easily. Traditional school wasn't really his thing. He even got suspended a few times. It reminds you that sometimes a disruptive thinker needs a different kind of learning.
And he found that with a specific teacher, right? Someone who really got him excited about learning.
Yes, it was his fourth grade teacher. She realized that the usual methods wouldn't work with Jobs, so what'd she do? She bribed him with $5 to finish each workbook.
Wait, she bribed him. That's unconventional to say the least.
But it worked. Later on, Jobs said that 1 year with that teacher meant more than any other in school. It shows how important it is to find the right approach for each person. And it highlights something crucial about Jobs. He responded to challenges, not lectures.
Makes you wonder how many other brilliant minds are out there just needing the right environment.
But even with this amazing teacher, Jobs dropped out of college, right?
He did after just one semester at Reed College.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets interesting. It wasn't that he hated learning. It was that he felt stifled by, like, the structure. He even stayed enrolled so he could sit in on a calligraphy class.
Calligraphy, seriously? The future tech giant, what?
Right. Totally unexpected. But this random interest ended up shaping how Apple designs things. Jobs later said that without that calligraphy class, the Macintosh wouldn't have had its famous fonts or that focus on beautiful typography.
Wow, talk about unexpected connections. A calligraphy class affecting how we use computers decades later. That's wild. It really shows a key part of how Jobs thought. He mixed things that seemed totally separate. He saw connections where others saw walls. This wasn't just about things looking pretty, it was about making tech more human, easier to connect with.
That seems to be a recurring thing with Jobs.
Yeah.
This unconventional path, trusting his gut, even when it led him in these weird directions.
Exactly. And that time, after dropping out, wasn't just about calligraphy. He traveled to India looking for enlightenment, exploring Eastern spirituality and Zen Buddhism.
Oh, yeah. And that experience had a huge impact on his whole design philosophy, didn't it?
For sure.
Yeah.
That focus on simplicity, elegance, stripping things down to the bare minimum, that's Zen. And it became what Apple was known for. These weren't just random ideas about design, they reflected how Jobs saw the world.
So we've got this super interesting mix of tech, art, and spirituality all coming together in young Jobs. But he still hasn't built Apple yet. This is all before the Apple.
Right. He reconnected with Steve Wozniak around this time. They were both part of this group called the Homebrew Computer Club. It was just a bunch of electronics nerds getting together, sharing ideas. The perfect place for something new to be born. It reminds you that even geniuses need the right community to really thrive.
It's crazy to think that Apple, this massive company, started in a garage. It was literally two guys with a love for electronics and a shared dream.
Don't forget, they also had totally different skills that worked perfectly together. Wozniak was the tech whiz, the one who could actually build the computers. But Jobs, he had something else.
Vision. He saw what personal computing could be before most people even knew what it was.
Exactly. He could see the big picture, how this tech could change the world. And he wasn't afraid to take risks to make that vision happen.
Which brings us to the Apple and that insane order from the Byte shop. It takes some serious guts to sell something that doesn't even really exist yet.
That was classic Jobs. He got that order for 50 Apple I computers, then used it to get credit from suppliers. He basically built the foundation of Apple on pure confidence in his vision.
That's incredible. It's one thing to have an idea, But to convince other people to buy into it, especially with something as new as personal computers were back then.
Exactly, and that's what made Jobs so good at what he did. He wasn't just selling a product, he was selling the future. And people even experienced businessmen like Paul Terrell at the Bite Shop. They were hooked. The Apple, I was really just the start. It proved that people wanted this, but the Apple II, that was the real game changer.
That's the one that put Apple on the map, right?
Yeah.
It's wild to think about it now with our smartphones and everything, but back then the Apple II was a huge deal.
Totally. It was one of the first successful home computers with color. And Jobs insisted on a really sleek design, even the case. That set the stage for Apple's whole thing about how things look. He understood that a computer isn't just a tool, it's something you interact with, you live with.
He was bringing design to a world of beige boxes and clunky interfaces. No wonder it was a hit.
And that's success. It led to one of the biggest moments in business history, Apple's IPO in 1980. They created more millionaires than any company ever had.
Jobs, Wozniak, all those early employees suddenly rolling in it. Talk about a rocket ship ride. But the documentary makes it clear, this is also when things got complicated for Jobs personally.
Yeah, this is where you see the real person, not just the legend. His relationship with Chrisanne Brennan, the birth of his daughter Lisa, him denying he was the father at first. It shows a more human side of Jobs, and honestly, a flawed one.
It's like something out of Shakespeare. Huge success with Apple, but this personal drama going on at the same time. It reminds you that even geniuses mess up.
Exactly, and that duality. It continues into the next part of the story with the Macintosh.
Oh, the Macintosh.
Yeah.
The one that changed everything. That iconic design with the mouse and the icons. It all started with Jobs' visit to Xerox PRs.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. Jobs saw what Xerox was doing with the graphical interface and the mouse. He knew right then that was the future. But Xerox wasn't doing much with it, so Jobs took that idea and ran with it.
And how? That 1984 Super Bowl ad. The imagery. The challenge to IBM. It's like a declaration of war.
It was a statement for sure. Apple wasn't just making another computer, they were taking on the whole industry. They wanted to be the rebels and innovators, and people loved that.
But even with all the hype, the Macintosh struggled at first. It shows that even revolutionary products don't always have it easy.
The tech was incredible, but it was expensive. And software developers weren't exactly lining up to get on board. The Mac needed software to really take off, and that took time.
And those struggles caused some serious problems inside Apple, right?
Yeah.
Between Jobs and John Scully, the CEO he brought in from Pepsi.
Oh, yeah. Jobs with his strong personality and his need for control. He clashed with Scully's more traditional business approach. It was a classic power struggle.
And it ended with one of the most shocking moments in tech history. Jobs being forced out of his own company.
It was huge news at the time. The guy who started Apple pushed out by his own board. But what's amazing is that wasn't the end for Jobs. It was the start of something new.
He went on to start NXT, which wasn't a huge success on its own, but it laid the groundwork for his return to Apple.
And you can't forget about Pixar.
Oh, right. Buying that little animation studio, that was one of the smartest things he ever did.
Jobs saw how big computer animation could be way before most people. His investment in Pixar wasn't about getting rich. It was about supporting creativity, pushing the limits of filmmaking.
And it worked. Pixar went from this small studio to a global animation giant under his leadership.
It just shows his incredible instincts. He could spot talent and help them grow. And all of this happened while he was away from Apple, a time that could have been the end of his career.
Instead, it was like he needed that time to recharge, to find new ideas. And then, in a twist nobody saw coming, Apple bought NXT Jobs, was back at the company he started.
What a comeback.
It really is. Like something out of Hollywood. The exiled CEO returns to save his company.
It's one of the best comeback stories in business, for sure.
Right.
But this wasn't just some trip down memory lane. Jobs came back with a purpose, and he knew exactly how to fix Apple.
The documentary talks about how he streamlined everything, got rid of projects left and right. Was that the first thing he did?
It had to happen. Apple was trying to do too much, be everything to everybody. Jobs knew they needed to focus, so he cut the product line way down, just a few core things. Then he reinvented them.
And that's where the iMac comes in, right? That colorful see-through computer. Nothing else looked like that.
The iMac was a message Apple's back and ready to shake things up. But it wasn't just about looks, although that design was iconic. Jobs got it. Design wasn't just about being pretty, it was about how a product felt, how it fit into your life. The iMac was sleek, easy to use. It was a whole new Apple.
It felt like the future. Not the past. But the iMac was just the beginning, right?
Totally. Then came the iPod. And with it, a whole new way to listen to music.
The iPod was brilliant. But what's really interesting is iTunes. That whole ecosystem, Jobs built around it. You didn't just have a cool MP3 player. You had this whole system for buying, organizing, listening to all your music.
He created a closed ecosystem, what some people called a walled garden. It was really controversial. People said it was bad for competition, that it limited choices, but you can't deny how successful it was.
People loved how easy it was to use. And it set the stage for everything Apple did after that.
Then you have the iPhone. That wasn't just a phone. It was a computer, a communication device, a music player, a fashion statement all in one. Another revolution.
It's hard to describe how much the iPhone changed things. How we talk to each other, get information, even how we get around. I can't imagine life without it.
And Jobs knew it was going to be huge. There's that video of him introducing it. You can just tell. He knows he's holding the future.
And when you thought it couldn't get any bigger than the iPhone, he comes out with the iPad. Who knew he needed a tablet until he showed us?
That was Jobs. He knew what people needed before they did, and he did it over and over again with every product.
It's incredible, especially when you think about him going through all that while he was sick. The documentary doesn't sugarcoat how hard his illness was.
Yeah, but he never stopped. That's willpower. His speech at Stanford in 2005 when he talks about dying, it's powerful.
Stay hungry, stay foolish. That sums up his whole philosophy. Be curious, take risks, never settle.
He definitely lived by that. Even at the end when he was sick, he kept pushing Apple forward.
When he resigned in 2011, it felt like the end of something special. Like the world lost a true visionary.
It was sad, but his influence is still everywhere. He created a company and a culture that still innovates and inspires.
Steve Jobs' story is something else. The ups and downs, that larger-than-life personality. It makes you think. What's the biggest takeaway? What's the lesson?
For me, it's the power of having a vision. Jobs believed in his ideas and he fought for them, even when nobody else got it. He showed us that impossible is just a word.
That's a great point to end on. What an incredible deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Now we want to hear from you what really struck you about Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Head to our socials and tell us what you think. Until next time, keep exploring.